The 1970 Chevy Chevelle SS 454 is an absolute beast that defined American muscle car madness at its peak. But here's the thing, most people only know about its massive engine and tire shredding power. What they don't know are the insane facts that made this car a legend beyond just horsepower numbers. From bizarre engineering choices to wild production secrets that Chevy tried to keep quiet, this muscle car has stories that'll blow your mind. We're counting down 20 weird facts about the 1970 Chevelle SS 454 that'll change everything you thought you knew about this monster. Let's get into it. Fact 20. The L6 engine was actually underrated. Here's where things get interesting right off the bat. Chevy officially rated the LS6 454 cubic inch engine at 450 horsepower. But here's the kicker, that number was a flat-out lie. Independent dyno tests revealed this monster was pumping out closer to 550 horsepower at the crank. You know why Chevy underrated it? Insurance companies and the government were cracking down hard on high-performance vehicles, so manufacturers started playing the numbers game. By keeping the official rating lower, buyers could actually afford insurance on these beasts. But wait, there's more to this story. The LS6 also produced 500 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 RPM, and even that figure was conservative. Mechanics and racers quickly discovered that these engines were making way more power than advertised. This wasn't just Chevy being modest either. Ford, Chrysler, and other manufacturers were doing the exact same thing during this era. The practice became so common that enthusiasts started calling them insurance horsepower ratings instead of actual horsepower. So when you see that 450 number, just remember, you're looking at one of the automotive industry's biggest understatements. The real power was hiding in plain sight, and only those who drove it knew the truth. Fact 19. It could only be ordered in specific color combinations. Now here's something that sounds absolutely crazy in today's world of unlimited customization. The 1970 Chevelle SS 454 came with strict factory color restrictions that limited what buyers could actually order. You couldn't just pick any color you wanted and call it a day. Chevy had specific color combinations approved for the SS package, and stepping outside those options meant you weren't getting a true SS 454 from the factory. The most iconic combination was cranberry red with white stripes, but there were only a handful of other approved colors. And get this, certain colors were only available during specific production periods throughout the model year. If you wanted forest green, you had to order during a specific window or you were out of luck. The reason behind this madness? Production efficiency and parts inventory management. Chevy was cranking out thousands of vehicles across multiple model lines, and limiting color combinations significantly streamlined the assembly process. But here's where it gets even weirder. Some dealerships would special order custom colors, but those cars technically weren't factory SS 454s in Chevy's books. Collectors today can spot these custom order vehicles, and they're worth significantly less than factory correct color combinations. The most valuable Chevelles are the ones that match original factory color codes exactly. So if you're hunting for an authentic SS 454, you'd better have your color charts ready, because authenticity is everything in the muscle car world. Fact 18. The cowl induction hood was a functional engineering marvel. Moving on to one of the coolest design features that actually served a massive purpose. That cowl induction hood wasn't just for show. It was a brilliant piece of functional engineering that gave the LS6 engine a serious performance advantage. Here's how it worked. When you stomped on the gas pedal, a vacuum-operated flap would open at the base of the windshield, right in the high-pressure zone. This pulled in cooler, denser air from outside the engine bay rather than the hot air sitting under the hood. And get this, cooler air means more oxygen molecules per cubic inch, which translates directly into more power and better combustion. The system was completely automatic too. You didn't have to flip any switches or pull any levers. The moment you hit wide-open throttle, that flap opened up and started feeding the beast. But wait, there's a weird quirk to this system. The cowl induction only activated under heavy acceleration, so during normal driving it stayed closed to maintain a cleaner engine bay appearance. Chevy engineers calculated that this system added approximately 15 to 20 horsepower at full throttle compared to a standard air cleaner setup. That might not sound like much, but in drag racing and street racing situations, Those extra horses made the difference between winning and losing. The design was so effective that Chevy used variations of cowl induction across multiple model years and vehicle lines. It became one of the most recognizable performance features of the muscle car era and remains highly desirable among collectors today. Fact 17. The front bench seat was still an option. Here's something that'll surprise modern car enthusiasts. Even though the Chevelle SS 454 was a hardcore performance machine, you could still order it with a front bench seat instead of bucket seats. Yeah, you read that right. Chevy offered a 3-across front bench seat option on what was supposedly their ultimate muscle car. Why would anyone do this? Well, back in 1970, practicality still mattered to American buyers. Families wanted performance, but also needed to fit 6 people in the car for weekend trips. The bench seat delete option saved you money too, and some drag racers actually preferred it because it was lighter than the heavy bucket seat setup. But here's the kicker. Only about 3% of SS 454 buyers actually chose the bench seat option, making those configurations extremely rare today. Collectors go crazy trying to find original bench seat SS models because they're so unusual. The combination of maximum performance with maximum seating capacity was pure American logic that makes zero sense by today's standards. Fact 16. It weighed more than most pickup trucks. Now let's talk about something Chevy definitely didn't advertise in their brochures. The 1970 Chevelle SS 454 tipped the scales at approximately 4,200 pounds in base configuration. That's heavier than most half-ton pickup trucks from the same era, which is absolutely insane when you think about it. This wasn't a lightweight sports car by any definition. The massive LS6 engine alone weighed over 700 pounds fully dressed with accessories. Add in the reinforced frame, heavy-duty suspension components, and mandatory power accessories, and you've got a genuine heavyweight champion. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite all that weight, the car could still run low 13-second quarter miles bone stock. The sheer torque output of that big block engine simply overpowered physics. Chevy engineers knew they were building a heavy car, so they compensated with more horsepower and torque than anyone else. The weight also gave the Chevelle incredible straight-line stability at high speeds, which was crucial for the drag strip. Fact 15. The Rock Crusher transmission was nearly indestructible. Moving on to one of the most legendary components ever bolted to a muscle car. The M22 Muncie 4-speed transmission, nicknamed the Rock Crusher, was the only manual gearbox rugged enough to handle the LS6's brutal torque. This transmission got its nickname from the distinctive whirring sound it made, a gear noise that announced you were driving something serious. The gears were cut straight rather than helical, which made them louder but exponentially stronger. And get this, the Rock Crusher could handle over 600 pound-feet of torque without breaking a sweat, which was critical because the LS6 could easily destroy weaker transmissions. The casting alone weighed significantly more than other 4-speeds because everything was overbuilt for durability. Drag racers loved these transmissions because they could take abuse all day long without failure. But here's the catch. Only cars equipped with the LS6 engine got the Rock Crusher as standard equipment. If you ordered the base LS5 engine, you got a different transmission entirely. Today, finding an original matching numbers Rock Crusher transmission adds thousands to a Chevelle's value because they're highly sought after by restorers and performance enthusiasts alike. Fact 14. The factory tires couldn't handle the power.
At the V8s in the Village presented by Coker Tire and Paragon Corvette reproductions, we spotted this 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle Super Sport.
Here's something absolutely ridiculous about the 1970 Chevelle SS 454. The factory Goodyear polyglass tires that came standard were completely inadequate for the car's power output. Chevy knew this and shipped them anyway. These tires were basically glorified passenger car rubber that would light up at the slightest provocation. Floor the throttle and you'd get wheel spin through first, second, and sometimes even third gear. But here's the kicker. This wasn't a design flaw, it was intentional. Chevy wanted buyers to experience that raw, untamed power immediately. The tire technology of 1970 simply hadn't caught up to engine development yet. Most owners replaced the factory tires within weeks of taking delivery because they'd destroy them doing burnouts. Drag racers would swap them before ever hitting the track because they were essentially useless for performance. The polyglass tires had a raised white letter design that looked fantastic but offered minimal grip. Modern radial tires make these cars almost dangerously faster than they were initially designed to be. Fact 13. It came with a special cooling package. Now here's where Chevy's engineering team showed they actually cared about reliability. The LS6 engine generated so much heat that it required a mandatory heavy-duty cooling package that wasn't optional. This wasn't your standard radiator setup either. The package included an oversized aluminum radiator with increased core thickness, a 7-blade clutch fan instead of the standard 5-blade, a larger capacity fan shroud for better airflow management, and upgraded coolant hoses that could handle higher temperatures and pressures. And get this, the system was designed to keep the engine cool, even during extended wide-open throttle runs at the drag strip. The radiator alone was 30% larger than what came in base Chevelle models. Chevy learned from earlier big block cars that inadequate cooling led to warped heads and blown gaskets. But here's what's crazy. Even with all these upgrades, the car still ran hot in traffic during the summer months. The sheer thermal output of that massive engine pushing over 500 horsepower was almost impossible to manage with 1970s technology. Many owners added aftermarket electric fans or other cooling modifications to keep temperatures manageable during daily driving. Fact 12. The speedometer only went to 120. Moving on to something that seems absolutely bizarre today. Despite being capable of speeds well over 130 miles per hour, the Chevelle SS 454 came with a speedometer that only registered to 120. Once you buried that needle, you were flying blind with no idea how fast you were actually going. Why would Chevy do this? Legal liability and insurance requirements dictated that manufacturers couldn't encourage excessive speeding by installing gauges that went too high. The government was cracking down on performance cars, and high-reading speedometers were seen as promoting dangerous driving. But here's the reality. Everyone knew these cars could go way faster than 120. Street racers and drag racers regularly exceeded the speedometer's limits. Some owners installed aftermarket gauges that read higher, but doing so voided certain warranties. The standard 120 miles per hour limit was purely cosmetic compliance with regulations that manufacturers despised. Chevy's engineers had to play political games while building cars that could embarrass European exotics in straight-line performance, creating this weird contradiction between capability and displayed information. Fact 11. The rear axle was borrowed from heavy-duty trucks.
When you've got your stubborn C-clip that will not come out even with a magnet.
Here's something that sounds completely insane, but makes perfect sense. The rear axle used in the Chevelle SS 454 was essentially the same heavy-duty 12-bolt unit found in Chevy's light truck lineup. This wasn't a parts bin compromise either. It was absolutely necessary. The LS6 engine produced so much torque that regular passenger car axles would explode under hard acceleration. Chevy engineers took the truck axle, modified the housing width to fit the Chevelle's dimensions, and reinforced everything even further. The ring and pinion gears were massive compared to standard car differentials. And get this, the axle tubes themselves were thicker gauge steel than what you'd find in regular A-body cars. This axle could theoretically handle over 800 horsepower before reaching its breaking point. Drag racers loved this setup because it was virtually bulletproof straight from the factory. But here's the trade-off. All that heavy-duty hardware added significant weight to the rear end, which affected handling balance. The 12-bolt rear became legendary in the performance community and remains highly desirable today for anyone building a high-horsepower muscle car. Fact 10. It had different exhausts on each side.
It has more airflow and more power, but it rattles. So get some brackets made at your local
Now here's where things get weird with the exhaust system. The 1970 Chevelle SS 454 actually had asymmetrical exhaust routing, meaning the pipes on the driver's side were routed differently than the passenger side. This wasn't some custom modification. It came this way from the factory. The reason? Packaging constraints under the chassis meant engineers had to work around frame rails, suspension components, and the fuel tank. The passenger side exhaust had a straighter shot to the rear, while the driver's side had to snake around multiple obstructions. And get this, the different routing lengths actually created slightly different exhaust notes between the two sides, if you listened carefully. Enthusiasts could tell which side of the car they were standing on just by the sound. But here's what's crazy. This asymmetry also meant that exhaust flow wasn't perfectly balanced between cylinder banks. Some racers claimed one bank ran slightly hotter than the other because of this design quirk. Chevy never addressed it because the performance impact was negligible, but it remains one of those odd details that make these cars fascinating to study and restore to absolute factory correctness. Fact 9. The alternator was inadequate for the electrical load. Moving on to an electrical system problem that plagued many owners. The standard alternator that came with the Chevelle SS 454 was a measly 63-amp unit that struggled to keep up with the car's electrical demands. This sounds ridiculous for such a high-performance machine, but remember, Chevy was trying to keep costs down. The problem got worse if you ordered options like air conditioning, power windows, or an upgraded stereo system. Add all those accessories and the alternator would struggle at idle, causing the battery to slowly drain during stop-and-go driving. And get this, the headlights would actually dim when you turned on the air conditioning at night. Many owners experienced dead batteries after short trips because the alternator couldn't replenish what the starter motor consumed. Chevy eventually offered a higher output alternator as a dealer-installed option, but most early production cars left the factory with the inadequate unit. The 63-amp alternator was designed for base model cars without performance considerations. Street racers and enthusiasts quickly learned to upgrade to 100-amp units from aftermarket suppliers. This remains a common modification today because the original electrical system simply wasn't engineered for modern accessories or extended idle periods at car shows. Fact 8. The fuel economy was worse than a modern semi-truck. Here's something that'll make modern environmentalists faint. The 1970s Chevelle SS 454 achieved approximately 8 miles per gallon in city driving and maybe 12 on the highway if you drove like a grandma. That's literally worse fuel economy than many modern 18-wheeler semi-trucks get today. The LS6 engine consumed fuel at an alarming rate because it was essentially a race engine detuned for street use. And get this, the fuel tank only held 18 gallons, which meant you had a realistic range of about 144 miles before hitting empty. Road trips required constant fuel stops, and with gas prices rising even in 1970, operating costs were astronomical. But here's the kicker, nobody who bought this car cared about fuel economy whatsoever. This was the era before fuel crises and environmental regulations changed everything. Owners accepted the terrible mileage as the price of performance. The carburetor alone dumped fuel into the engine with reckless abandon. Chevy made zero effort to optimize efficiency because buyers wanted maximum power. Consequences be damned. This gas-guzzling nature is precisely why these cars became endangered species after the oil embargo hit just a few years later. Fact 7. It required premium fuel that barely existed. Now here's where things get even more complicated with fuel. The LS6 engine required 103 octane leaded fuel to run properly without detonation. That compression ratio was so high that anything less would cause catastrophic engine knocking. But here's the problem. 103 octane fuel was becoming increasingly rare at gas stations in 1970. Most stations only carried 93 or 95 octane as their premium option. Owners had to hunt for specific stations that sold racing fuel or aviation gas to keep their engines happy. And get this, if you couldn't find high enough octane fuel, you had two choices: retard the timing and lose power, or risk destroying your engine through detonation. Many owners carried octane booster additives in their trunks just to make pump gas usable. The lead content in fuel was also being reduced due to environmental concerns, which further complicated matters. This fuel requirement made the car nearly impossible to drive on long road trips through rural areas where high-octane options didn't exist. Within a few years, this octane requirement alone made the LS6 obsolete as fuel standards changed nationwide and manufacturers had to drastically reduce compression ratios. Fact 6. The front suspension was upgraded 3 times during production. Moving on to something that shows Chevy was constantly improving the car mid-production. The front suspension on the Chevelle SS 454 was actually revised 3 separate times during the 1970 model year. Early production cars had issues with excessive understeer and poor handling balance because the heavy engine overwhelmed the front suspension. Chevy responded by upgrading spring rates, then changing bushing compounds, and finally revising the entire geometry slightly. And get this, these changes happened without any announcement or documentation, so cars built in September 1969 were significantly different than cars built in June 1970. Collectors obsess over these variations because early cars handle worse but are more original, while late production cars drive better but have revised components. The changes were made on the fly as customer complaints rolled in from dealers. Chevy's engineers were literally problem-solving in real time during active production. This created a nightmare for parts cataloging because multiple configurations existed under the same model year designation. Restoration experts have to verify production dates to source correct suspension components, and many owners don't even realize their car has been through multiple engineering revisions that technically make it unique. Fact 5. The frame rails were prone to catastrophic cracking.
Way ahead of myself. Here's the new frame. Already got the axle up underneath it. Of course,
Here's something Chevy definitely didn't want you to know about. The frame rails on the 1970 Chevelle SS 454 had a serious structural weakness that caused cracking under hard launches. The torque from the LS6 engine would literally twist the frame, and stress fractures would develop near the rear suspension mounting points. And get this, Chevy knew about this problem, but never issued a recall or official fix. Drag racers discovered the issue first when their frames would crack after repeated hard launches at the strip. The problem got worse in cars that saw regular aggressive driving or burnout competitions. Many owners didn't even know their frames were cracked until they put the car on a lift years later. The cracks would start small and propagate over time until the structural integrity was seriously compromised. Some frames actually broke completely in half during spirited driving, which was terrifying and dangerous. Aftermarket companies started selling frame reinforcement kits within months of the car's release. Today, any serious buyer inspects the frame rails thoroughly before purchasing, because repairing these cracks is expensive and labor-intensive, significantly affecting the car's value and safety for any type of performance driving. Fact 4. It came with a mandatory anti-spin differential. Now here's where Chevy made a decision that actually saved lives. Every single Chevelle SS 454 came standard with a Positraction limited slip differential that was mandatory, not optional. You couldn't order the car without it, period. The reason was simple. With over 500 pound-feet of torque going to the rear wheels, an open differential would be a death trap. Hit the gas in a turn with an open diff, and the inside wheel would spin while the outside wheel did nothing, causing immediate loss of control. And get this. The Positraction unit was specifically calibrated for the LS6's torque output with heavy-duty clutch packs that could handle punishment. The system ensured both rear wheels received power simultaneously, which improved traction dramatically and made the car somewhat controllable. But here's the catch. The Positraction required special limited slip additive in the gear oil, and if owners didn't maintain it properly, the clutches would chatter and eventually fail. Many original units are worn out today from decades of neglect or abuse. The mandatory inclusion of this diff added several $100s to the base price, but it was absolutely essential for safety and performance given the ridiculous power levels involved. Fact 3. The production run lasted only 8 months. Moving on to something that makes these cars incredibly rare today. The 1970 Chevelle SS 454 LS6 was only produced for approximately 8 months total. Production started in September 1969 for the 1970 model year and ended abruptly in April 1970. Why such a short run? Multiple factors killed it quickly. Insurance companies were hammering young buyers with astronomical premiums, sometimes costing more than the car payment itself. Government regulations were tightening around emissions and safety standards that the LS6 couldn't meet. And get this, Chevy was losing money on every single unit because the engine was so expensive to build. The total production number was only around 4,000 units, making it one of the rarest muscle cars ever produced. Many of those cars were destroyed in accidents, drag racing incidents, or simply worn out and scrapped. Survivors today are worth astronomical sums because so few remain in existence. Chevy knew by early 1970 that the muscle car era was ending, and the LS6 represented the absolute peak before everything changed. The short production window makes documentation scarce, and authenticity verification difficult for collectors seeking genuine examples. Fact 2. The hood weighed over 70 pounds. Here's something you'd never expect about a piece of sheet metal. The cowl induction hood on the Chevelle SS 454 weighed over 70 pounds, which is absolutely insane for a hood panel. Most standard car hoods from that era weighed around 40 to 50 pounds maximum. The extra weight came from the reinforcement structure needed to support the cowl induction system and prevent hood flutter at high speeds. And get this, the hood was so heavy that Chevy had to install upgraded hood springs just to help lift it. Opening the hood was a two-person job if you didn't want to throw your back out. The steel was thicker gauge than standard hoods because the cowl induction flap mechanism required rigid mounting points that wouldn't flex or vibrate. But here's the kicker. That massive weight sitting so far forward actually hurt weight distribution and made the front end even heavier. Today, aftermarket companies sell lightweight fiberglass reproduction hoods that look identical but weigh half as much. Original steel hoods command premium prices from restoration purists who want every component factory correct, despite the ridiculous weight penalty that comes with authenticity. Fact 1. Only 3 convertibles were ever built. And here's the #1 weird fact that blows everyone's mind. Chevy only built 3, yes 3, Chevelle SS 454 LS6 convertibles during the entire production run. This wasn't intentional exclusivity either. It was pure coincidence. The convertible body style was available in the Chevelle lineup, and technically, you could order an SS 454 as a convertible. But almost nobody did. The convertible body added weight, reduced structural rigidity, and cost significantly more than the hardtop. Serious performance buyers wanted the lightest, stiffest platform possible, which meant the sports coupe was the obvious choice. And get this, of those 3 convertibles built, only 2 are confirmed to still exist today. The third car's whereabouts remain unknown, possibly destroyed or rotting in someone's barn. These 2 surviving convertibles are worth millions of dollars each because they're essentially unicorns in the collector car world. The combination of rarity and desirability makes them some of the most valuable American muscle cars ever produced. Chevy never advertised the convertible option with the LS6 package because they knew it made 0 sense from a performance standpoint, but those 3 buyers who checked that box on the order form created automotive legends that will never be replicated. So, there you have it, 20 absolutely insane facts about the 1970 Chevy Chevelle SS 454 that prove this car was way more than just a big engine in a mid-size body. From catastrophic frame cracks to impossible fuel requirements to hood weights that required 2 people, this muscle car was an engineering masterpiece and a practical nightmare all rolled into one. If you enjoyed these facts, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into legendary cars and motorcycles. Drop a comment below telling us which fact shocked you the most, or if you've got your own weird Chevelle story to share. And hey, if you want us to cover another specific vehicle, let us know what you want to see next. Thanks for watching, and remember, these cars represented the absolute peak of American muscle before everything changed forever. Keep the rubber side down, and we'll see you in the next one.